Please welcome Sequoia Design Lab founder, James Buckhouse.
Hello. Every time I hear Brick House in my head, because my last name is Buckhouse, I always think, he's a Buckhouse. So anyway, so thank you. Thank you. I don't know about you, but I feel pretty special to be in rooms like this because this is just not an ordinary group of people. It's a very special group of people where we have a very special calling, which is to make a change in the world, make a difference in the world, to actually transform the world from where it is now to where we want it to be. And it's hard. It's really hard. And the one kind of secret message I heard throughout the day today was, maybe it wasn't so secret, but the one kind of through line was that the very best experiences win. So how are you going to make that best experience? Well, of course you need data. Of course you need understanding. Of course you need to fine-tune your product. You need to profoundly understand your customers, but you need something else. You need this other thing, which is a story. Yeah. So if we believe that the best experiences win, then it only seemed fair that we would walk the walk and we talk the talk and try to put together a little experience to end the day on. So we have put together a little experience for you to end the day. And instead of talking to you about the structure of story, instead of talking to you about here's the 3 or 4 things that I think might go into a really good product, we're going to have an experience together. Yeah, an experience. An experience. So if you are willing to have this experience with me, we're going to leave our role as conference attendee and find ourselves back into that place of imagination where you conjure images in your mind, where you allow yourself ever so slightly to dream of the world you want to create. So if you're with me, we're going to count down from 3, and then we'll find ourselves in this world. 3, 2, neck deep in the design of a secret project. The type of project where you don't talk about it until it's done, and even when you do, you keep the details to yourself. Up to my chin, wrestling the problem the way Jacob wrestled the angel, suffering in the fight, getting my hip crushed, but refusing to back down. Fighting until I'd earned the right to name the nexus of the struggle, and deep in what athletes and artists know as the flow. And starting to get that familiar buzzing of an idea scumbling through the substrate to the surface of articulation. And in that moment, I dropped my stylus onto my desk and snuck out the back door. My machine sat there blinking, hardly able to imagine I had gotten up to leave. Now I jumped across Market Street and slipped into the nearby classical music conservatory to commit my favorite crime. It's a type of reverse truancy where I sneak into classes I'm not actually signed up to attend, and no one expects outsiders to break into classical music lectures, but it's as easy as strolling by with a score in your hands. Now today's master class centered on the Bach cello suites. And 3 master cello professors had flown in to critique a student's playing. Now, what happens next, it requires a little bit of explanation, so let me see if I can describe it to you. As the student starts to play, my normal vision took a back seat to my imagination, and superimposed on top of what was actually there, I projected my own reductive, essential take on the events at hand. My vision turned into a type of pencil vision where the whole world was a series of sketches, and I saw music appearing as cresting waves of graphite and twisting from one musical thought to the next, and the line turned on point across imaginary paper, and my mind drew charcoal shadows of the players as they were gripping their instruments, and the professors leaning in with concern or scorn or occasional delight. And the music then became these inky wash strokes with its thickness mapped to some type of importance velocity, and the whole world turned into a monochromatic, pencil and charcoal shaded, inky brushstroke animation of Bach's brilliance. Now I was enjoying it very much, but one professor there wasn't so happy with the performance. And he cut off the cellist mid-phrase and remanded the cellist to go back and identify the key he was in, not just the note he was playing. And the player was flustered. He had to calculate for a second about the key. Now, was he in the 4th or was he in the 5th? The 5th in 1 second. And this pause lit a fire into the professor, who saw a chance to teach a most crucial lesson in interpreting Bach's music. And And at that moment, my oldest, most favorite idea of Bach came rushing back to me, that there is a second slow motion melody hidden inside the harmonic progression. And that this secret melody makes the purported melody inconsequential to the poignancy of the true story hidden in the walk back home to the tonic. It's like the difference between the bones of majestic architecture and the tiny degree, elements of filigree carved in along the details. Now sure, the details are lovely, but the story comes from bigger ideas. The cellist, however, was caught up in the details, the surface dazzle, the fancy finger work he trained his whole life to be able to do, the show-off stuff that kept him home at night in high school practicing etudes while his buddies, who had not been cursed with the blessing of a calling, were out getting drunk or causing trouble. And the surface snazziness had been hard-won, and it was nearly impossible for the cellist to imagine that it somehow wasn't the important part of the piece. Now, the professor, unable to explain what was bothering him, ran over to the organ, and he started playing the second hidden melody, emphasizing the harmonic progression and the true story of the piece, urging the cellist to find the hidden chord. And the professor and the student pushed on, struggling but trusting, and then with a jolt, the epiphany snapped into place in the brain and the heart of the cellist, and he finally started to hear the slow motion melody, and he started to gush. For the first time, he heard Bach's essay on the human condition as it marched from the tonic towards adventure and struggle and poignancy, and then back home again. And when the cellist finally found his way home, all of us could feel it in the classroom, and each nearly burst into tears with the truth of human experience laid bare. For everyone, at some level, knows that poignancy of returning home. Now, still steeped in pencil vision, still seeing the world as this combination of gesture lines and people and places and music and abstract emotion, my own puzzles started creeping back into my mind. That problem I was trying to solve that had driven me out of the studio in the first place, and that music was helping me solve it. And I thought, what can Bach teach us about slow time and fast time in the same experience? About the details of the journey in design, about the pleasure and poignancy of the return home, and about the importance of knowing the bones of the story regardless of the filigree. I was experiencing my pencil vision for a reason, and I started to sketch out what I needed to do next. Now, I know this method of working isn't typical. You expect designers to be designing boxes inside of boxes inside of boxes with an occasional rectangle with a little rounded corner and occasional tidy a circle or two, with little arrows that look very important for the UX. And you typically think of a designer as making designy-y decisions like book or thin. But book or thin, that's filigree. What matters are people and experiences. Hold on, experiences. Apps aren't just a collection of taps, that's a piano sonata. And apps aren't just swipe stakes and text entry, that's an ATM. Apps portend the sum of human experience, if you do it right. Ultimately, there will be choices declared and a vocabulary expressed that adds up to a total design system, the epidermis of design. But before any of that can be put to use, the first step is to have some sense of what human experience is all about in the first place. The story. And finding your way towards this story, that's our job in creating great products. Now, before I started designing apps, I used to make movies. The Shrek movies, Shrek 1, 2, and 3, Madagascar movies, Monsters vs. Aliens, Ants, Shrek the Halls, The Christmas Special, The Peacemaker, Matrix Revolutions. My role spans cinematography to choreography to story to art to lighting to a special type of joke writing called punch-up, where you found a way to brighten the moment, to create something thrilling or funny that still somehow stayed in character, even as you provided something unexpected or unusual. And I know these all seem like different skills, but they weren't really. We wrote the movies by drawing them, and we lived on the liminal edge between words and images. And we would cast any spell necessary to conjure up the required emotion. All of this was in the service of story. And when we worked on the films, the scene wasn't over until there was an emotional transformation. If Shrek didn't change by the time the scene was over, then what was the purpose of having this scene in the first place? In film slang, we call this a turn. And every scene must turn. If it doesn't turn, it's cut. Now, creating these movies, the only thing that mattered was the emotional transformation, the turn. And at every interval, we designed for the turn. If Shrek entered a scene happy, he left upset. If Shrek entered upset, he left curious, calmed, cautious, startled, somehow changed. He never left a scene in the same emotional state as when he entered. And the breakthrough for me as an artist was when I started to see, oh, whatever you create and experience, no matter what, from an app to a ballet to a television series to a painting to a novel to a payments flow to a poem to a dress, it's about architecting this series of turns. It's about stacking these series of transformations. And the deeper I went into the study of transformation, the more I found. You know, if you start at today's business books, and then you go one step back to French literary theory of the 80s, and then one step back to the hero's journey that inspired George Lucas and Star Wars, and then one step back further and further and further. Pretty soon, there you are 2,300 years ago with Aristotle, who wrote it up like this: peripeteia, pathos, agnoresis, catharsis. And then here it is again in English. And it all began, and where you see the world as a problem. The world's changed, what do? The old way isn't working. We need a different way. We need a transformation. And if you were to break these down into 4 easy steps you might remember tomorrow, is you got to know thy customer. You got to sell the problem. And you got to be different, not better. And that finally it should end with a transformation. Because if your app doesn't end with transformation, then what was the point of having it in the first place? Your app should change someone's emotional state. They should enter one way and be transformed by the experience so that when they exit, there's someone new, someone who's just a little bit closer to the person they want to become. Because no one just, uses an app because they want to get a little bit better. Better, it turns out, is a race to the bottom. As soon as all you bother to do is to promise a better way, then pretty soon you've got to be cheaper, faster, or more until you're doing nearly everything, nearly instantly, for nearly nothing. What we all seek is a different way. Difference. Because we realize the old way isn't working, and no matter how hard or fast we work, we're not going to get there with the old approach. We must demonstrate difference, born from comedy, empathy, and a poignant sense of the human condition. But what if you weren't just designing UI or UX for an app? Instead, we're designing a movie starring the person who used your product. What would you do? In that movie, it was based on an emotional, poignant, funny, marvelous story. And what if our job was to witness the universe in its vast and noble entirety? Well, that starts with understanding what we're actually designing. It isn't just considering the pixels on your app or the Chrome on your phone or the download flow. It's designing for the kids on the bus, the honking horns, the crying baby, the crazy guy with the bag of bottle caps, the smell of barbecue sauce, the overheard phone calls, the guy singing country classics, the herky-jerky rage of the bus driver screaming at pedestrians as the bus lurches forward. It's designing that sticky feeling on the seats and the satisfaction of a super cute outfit and the empty pang of an earnest, flawed, hopeful bus rider who's recently lost her favorite aunt and who pulls from her phone and in that right moment sees something new. You're designing the stone wall filled with bullets and the street turned to hell and the good people who ought to be home laughing with their family and sharing a meal who are now deaf from the shells blowing up in the town square. You're designing for that moment when a witness sends a message, a single message to the rest of the world that cries out, I am here. This just happened. Help us. You're designing for that long roll of paper across the green vinyl bench in the examination room. And the TV with the bad audio, and the sneakers on the nurse, and the pen on the clipboard, and the paperwork on the desk, and the photocopy of common questions about rare diseases. As someone's best friend taps for answers and tries to book next steps and stays calm, and to not get too scared as the TV plays a game show where the contestants silently jump and clap in obscene close-up. You're designing that bedside table lamp, the mattress, the blanket, the pajamas, the propped up pillows, and the cup of hot chocolate, and a mug around it that contains it, and the happy couple holding a tablet and watching the same movie they saw together on their first date. We are not omnipotent, we are not omniscient, but we can strive to be omni-empathetic. We can be humble enough to know that everything happens within the context of the life story of others. Now, back on my quest, I left the conservatory and walked down Market Street towards Union Square. And there was this terrible traffic jam, and I started to sketch out the bent lump of cars all kinked together and angry, unable to creep past a single choke point in the road. And I started to think about the illusion of user choice, where we blame the user for getting stuck in the wrong lane at the wrong time. But how can empathy help us untangle that knot and retrace the steps? Why was every car here? Why don't they turn? Mapping a series of one-way streets and freeway on-ramps and construction paints a picture of a traffic trap that started 4 turns back. I kept walking. What can we learn from tourists taking selfies at the art museum about the importance of marking a specific time and place? What can we learn from their choices? How do physical, social, temporal, and cultural influences of the moment encourage different decisions? And how can we work to assure that our work as artists, designers, writers, composers, choreographers, curators, editors, engineers, and data scientists, and product people, how can we make sure that we are encouraging the right decisions? When do we give people what we think they want, and when should we strike out and lead the crowd to somewhere new? Empathy, courage, and artistic conviction will wrestle inside of our brains as we work through this particular puzzle, but my hope for each of us is that we'll create decisions born from urgent insight into what makes us human. So back to designing apps and designing experiences. What aspect of the human condition are you hoping to encourage? You know, for Twitter, the founders hope to further the open exchange of information. They even went as far as to describe it in the early days as being its potential success would be a triumph of humanity, not a triumph of technology. At Airbnb, we just heard from Airbnb, they want to capture that feeling of being at home, so that feeling of belonging, so that all of us might feel that we belong anywhere. Belonging, humanity, these words connote a sense of shared purpose. Without a shared sense of purpose, though, your work will lack that exquisite pressure required for transformative thought. Equally important, what aspects of the human condition would you like to reduce? If you hate clickbait, strive to create pathways that celebrate meaningful content. If you despise prejudice, can you design a system of engagement that engenders comedy? Hate trolls, invent a new mechanic like a karma score. Raging against fake news, livid about the system in place that rewards ignoble action? Then take action. Don't start your design with a grid or a mock. Start with human experience. You'll know your product and designs and the decisions you want to make once you know what you want to encourage, reveal, and augment about being human. For we're never designing pixels, we're designing complements to the human condition. And above all, after decades of telling the world that somehow art and science and design were disconnected, and we got to remember that being just a designer, or just an artist, or just an engineer, or just a scientist isn't even remotely good enough. We must act like all of these at once. Science nor poetics alone can save us. There's no Leonardo da Vinci the artist without Leonardo the inventor, Leonardo the architect, or Leonardo the strategist, or Leonardo the researcher. We must be all of these at once, just as he was, if we expect to make something worthy of other human souls to use. Thank you very much, and special thank you for the audio to John Davis, John Collins, Adam Reisman, Stuart Kern, and the team at Intercom. Thank you.